I'm JP Tuesday.
And I'm Kiki Cannon. As lifelong Disney fans, the work of countless talented Disney creatives have shaped our lives.
Now, as the Disney catalog expands, we're taking a journey through film and television to discover if that spark that shaped us as children lives on in adulthood.
Does your favorite Disney media still cast that same spell? Join us as we find out. We are Rewatching the Magic.
Hi, Kiki.
Hi, Tuesday.
All right, this is our Juneteenth episode. This episode will be releasing on June 19th. What is Juneteenth? Juneteenth is a relatively recent holiday, becoming a federal holiday.
Well, a relatively recent holiday for white people.
Yeah, okay. Officially recognized national holiday. Let's go with that. As it became a national recognized federal holiday in 2021, Juneteenth celebrates the emancipation of the slaves on June 19th, 1865. Of course, the name coming from the portmanteau of June and 19th, Juneteenth.
Yeah.
As for what we decided to do, it took us a while. Once we've discovered, oh, hey, we have an episode coming out on Juneteenth, we should do something relative to that day. There was a lot of ideas that we bounced off each other, including an episode we've already done in Hidden Figures, which is also a good movie to watch on Juneteenth. We also decided to go with the movie Ruby Bridges, which is the true story of Ruby Bridges, one of the first Black children to go to a white school. This movie kind of had a bit of controversy earlier this year when it was pulled from a school in, you're not going to be shocked about this, Florida, after a parent felt that the movie was inappropriate to be shown in schools because it would show that white people disliked Black people, as the hateful white people were too hateful and too mean, and that is not something a child should watch. Even though this was part of Black History Month curriculum for years in that school, from what I've read. And this is a TV movie of the week. This aired on television.
On ABC, as part of the wonderful world of Disney. Yeah.
So yeah, this is a Disney movie, television movie. And this is a television movie from the 90s, and boy, does it look like a television movie from the 90s.
Yeah. The good news about that story is that decision to pull it was not upheld. The parent complained. Their exact quote in the complaint was, "This will teach children that white people hate Black people." And the committee, which was made up of teachers, administrators, and parents in the community, including some sort of curriculum specialist or library specialist that had been brought in. They all watched the film together. They read the review and they looked at it. And this is my quote here. They finally decided that your objection is stupid and you should feel stupid for making it. So yeah, they decided not to pull the movie. And the movie was allowed to continue being shown, but is
considering it's Florida,
correct decision in Florida. Thank you for making a correct decision.
Yeah, but considering it's Florida,
yeah, I mean, who knows what'll happen 6 months from now? But yeah, in that case was decided reasonably. After one parent complained, and it literally was one parent.
Yeah, from my understanding of the story, they gave permission slips to every parent in the class. Every parent was given the opportunity to watch a clip from the film to get an idea of what their children would be watching, and that was the decision of that one parent to not sign the permission slip and make a fuss over the movie.
Yeah.
I mean, this is history. This is an event that actually happened. This is American history and relatively recent history because Ruby Bridges is still alive.
Yes, as of this recording, she is still living at the current age of 68.
So yeah, which is really crazy considering there are people who talk about events of this era, the 1960s, the civil rights movement, as, oh, it was so long ago, we don't even really need to talk about that anymore. It's like, there are people who are still alive who are affected by that.
Yeah. I mean, as we've said before, I live in the South. I live in the deep South. And my mother told me stories about when the high school she went to, which was eventually the high school that I went to, was set to be integrated, and how worried she was that there would be violence because the white students threatened violence, and their parents threatened violence. And my mother said that she didn't particularly have any strong feelings at the time about the integration of the schools, but she was very worried that other students were going to cause violence. Knowing her parents, they probably did have strong feelings about the integration of the schools. I will just say that. But my mother was always a bit more progressive. So, she was never worried that the other students coming in would be the one causing the violence. She was always worried that the white students would be the pushback causing the violence, she said. And fortunately for her and for our town, the integration went more or less smoothly in the sense that there weren't outright violence. I'm not saying that it went smoothly for the individual students, who I'm sure had a difficult time at first.
Yeah.
But unlike Ruby Bridges, there was no need for National Guard or an enlarged police presence or things like that.
There's that famous photo of 6-year-old Ruby Bridges being escorted out of the school by 3 U.S. Marshals.
Yeah.
6 years old.
Yeah.
And there's an army of people wishing her death for just wanting to go to school.
The thing that I'm going to say about this movie, and here's the thing in talking about this movie, is that this movie, from everything that I could find, is the movie does leave some stuff out, but everything contained within the movie is factual.
Which is rare for a biopic.
Yeah, they didn't really, from what I could tell in researching this film, they did not really add anything that was like, oh, that didn't happen, to dramatize the film. There was a lot of stuff they could have added that would have dramatized the film that they left out. But everything in the film, when I was like, oh, I wonder if they added that for drama, nope, that happened. And this movie, I don't know if you found this, but I found this, for a TV movie of the week, after school special kind of feel, because boy, does this feel like, and next on a very special episode, we talk about the struggle of a girl who, it feels like that. If you ever watched all those, if you're our age and you watched those as a kid, it really feels like that in the tone and the presentation and the background music and the level of
acting, the quality of actors.
Yeah.
No disrespect to any of the actors in this movie. But
yeah, the script is at a very basic level. There's
this was clearly meant to be shown to children. The dialogue.
Yeah, this was very much made to be shown to children in school when the teacher is sick that day.
Yeah. The dialogue is very simplistic.
Yeah, you can tell this was written for, to be shown to ages 7 to 12 in a school setting. This is very much an educational picture.
And they could have used a lot more colorful language, especially of the angry parents cursing out young Ruby.
Okay, but what I was going to say was, for a film made for that particular, type of demographic, this film goes shockingly hard. Yeah. And I give it all of the credit for that there are some punches they did not pull, and mad respect for it.
Like, they never say the N-word, but they write it. Like, right on...
Oh, well, they say a lot of permutations of the N-word.
No adult says the N-word in this movie.
They don't hard R the N-word. But there are a lot of permutations that, let me tell you, growing up in the South, I heard every one of those permutations out of somebody's mouth growing up.
And the N-word is written on the wall of the school. It looks like one of the parents wrote it with KKK right under it.
Yeah, and interestingly, they cut off the R, which is also a choice that I did kind of laugh at.
And they have one of the kids say it.
Yeah, but once again, he kind of has a lisp, so
he says it like a baby.
So it comes off once again without the hard R, which is again a choice. But there are some permutations that they use in there with like feminizing it and everything, which I will tell you, in the South growing up, there were people who thought that was a kinder way to refer to Black women. Like, that was, you're not insulting them. It's just a feminized version of Negro. Which, nah, that ain't it. I will tell you, that has phased out in the past few decades. You will really not hear that anymore. But when I was growing up, mainly among older people, that's what you would hear older people refer to, like, well, when I was growing up, I had a nanny, and she was so wonderful, and that was the word they would use to refer to her. And you hear it a lot in this movie referred to little Ruby, and man, did that hit at me, because I was a little kid again, hearing all these old women talk about, the nanny that raised them, and thinking, like, you don't think that's, like, horrible at all, do you? Like, you just don't hear it coming out of your mouth, do you? But yeah, it's so weird. Like, I don't know how this hits for somebody that didn't grow up in that culture, but man, for me watching this, I was like, oh man, I grew up around these people that would have been standing outside that school shouting at that little girl.
And I mean, it's still there. Only the target has been changed. Yes, in some cases it's still towards Black people, but it's also now towards immigrants, and then towards the gay people, now to the trans community.
Yeah, and there's a scene in the movie where the Jewish owners of the grocery store asked them not to show up at the store anymore. And he reminds them, like, Ruby's father reminds them, like, hey, the black community was the only one that would come to a Jewish-owned grocery store when y'all first moved in. The white folks weren't coming here,
Mm-hmm.
And now you're kicking the black folks out, and
Yeah.
where's that solidarity in turn? And he's not wrong. And once again, I looked it up, and that's a thing that did happen. The thing about, there's a point in the movie where they spend a lot of time on this, actually. The thing about Ruby being scared to eat.
Yeah, there's that scene where the one mother says, "We're going to poison you. We're going to poison you," and which forces Ruby to no longer eat cooked food because she believes that they're going to the stores and poisoning all of the food just so she can't eat it. So she only eats packaged food like potato chips and Coke.
Yeah, and the thing is that was real. But they show, like, all the students bringing their food from home. And so it doesn't seem, and like all the teachers too, like everybody's bringing their food from home. But from what I read, it seems like what happened was they were so worried about somebody actually trying to poison Ruby's food that she was only allowed to eat lunches from home. So she couldn't eat any meals served by the school because they were afraid that if they brought her food into the room, somebody was going to try to poison it. I don't know if they show at one point that her teacher, because she was, even once other students, and this is true because at first she was the only student in the school because the other parents pulled all of their children out of school. So for the first few days, she was the only student in the school. And then that minister and his little girl broke the line, and he brought his daughter into the school, and then a few parents followed him and all, but they wouldn't let their students have Ruby in the class. So for that first full year, Ruby was taught alone in a classroom with a single teacher. That part is true. But they show in the movie the teacher saying, well, if she can't go into the classroom with the white students, then we'll bring the white students for a couple of hours a day into her classroom for, like, playtime or something.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that part is true. I couldn't find verification about that part of the story very easily. So that may be the one thing in the movie that they added, but I don't know. However, I do know that she was the only student in her class for that first year.
Mm-hmm.
But that may be how they got around it. Like, well, she's not actually in their class, but they have a playtime for an hour a day or something.
And the way they do that playtime scene is kind of heartbreaking because the kids are playing Duck Duck Goose and they keep on skipping over Ruby, and they have reading time, and Ruby is reading a book and the kids are putting fingers in their ears so they don't have to listen to her. And again, the one kid saying, "My mom says I can't play with you because you're N-word." So it's it's kind of harping, you know, this kid just wants to learn, and everything's going against her. Again, and this was a true, you know, I don't know how much of that is true, the playtime stuff.
Yeah.
But as you said, everything else in the movie seemingly actually happened to her.
Yeah, including, I mean, I was kind of thinking that some of the stuff that and I don't know why I was thinking this. I mean, I live in a place where every second pickup truck has Confederate flags plastered all over it to this day. So I don't know why I was thinking that was out of the thing, but like the woman who brings the little black baby doll in a coffin. Like, she actually made a coffin for a black baby doll and keeps bringing it to the protest line and screaming, like, we're going to put you in here.
We're going to hang you until you're dead.
Yeah, I mean, they threatened to lynch the poor girl in very explicit terms.
And yeah, this is stuff that really happened. This is not, you know, and
yeah, and I looked it up, and like all of those people really did that. The baby doll in the coffin, the woman that screamed about poisoning her, the people who screamed about lynching her, you know.
And I mean, she wasn't the only one, obviously, but this was happening all over the South as integrated schools was going around because, you know, they wanted to keep segregation, whites only, and, you know, like, this was history. This is American history, like it or not. This happened.
Yeah, I mean, there is a scene in the movie where Ruby is the only one that shows up to the school, and Mrs. Bridges said, you know, why, where are the other kids? We were told there were going to be 6 other kids. And the principal or whatever, the administrator woman that's kind of the
villain,
the stand-in villain for the, I mean, you know, you've got to have like the one person to kind of be the central mouthpiece for all this hate. Mm-hmm. So they have the kind of administrator woman that's there on the day, you know, every day for the school, kind of voicing the state side version, because the governor of Louisiana wasn't for it, but you know, it was a national thing they were pushing, of course. And she says that the other parents probably had more sense than to put their children through it. Well, there were 6 students that had been chosen by the NAACP. And this was the part that I didn't know about the 6 children that were chosen, was that they were chosen because of their high academic ability.
Yeah, the movie really pushes Ruby's intelligence, that she is very advanced for someone her own age.
And that to me is kind of the sad part. The NAACP felt, and I know why they felt that. And that's the thing that really, really hurts, is that the feeling in the Black community that it couldn't just be any Black child that integrated. It had to be exceptional Black children.
I mean, you had to show that. This is going to sound really bad, but the NAACP is not. It wouldn't look good on them if they sent a kid and he was the slow kid or something like that. So they had to send
I mean, it's the idea of the model minority, you know.
Yeah, and you know, it's even true to this day, whether you're Black, brown, or even a woman, work twice as hard for half the credit.
Yeah, and I think anybody that's any part of any marginalized group knows that feeling of having to prove that, you know, I can be, you know, even better than you despite the, you know, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I just, and of course I had never really thought about it, but it makes sense in retrospect that they wouldn't pick just any child, you know. But it's ridiculous that I had just never thought of it, because of course that's what you're going to do. And Ruby said in later years that she didn't realize it at the time because of course she was only 6, but every bit of clothing that she's wearing in all of those historical pictures was donated to her family because her family couldn't afford clothing that nice. But she needed to look pretty and pristine every single day. She couldn't wear the same dress twice. She couldn't wear the, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So all of these like really expensive, beautiful, photogenic dresses and nice clean white socks and shiny patent leather shoes were donated to the family so that she would always look beautiful and kind of wealthy when she went into school, even though they lived in a poor neighborhood.
Yeah, it's you know, seeing is believing. You got, if you know, got to look the part. Unfortunate, yeah, and yes, especially in this situation, because if she went there with, you know, torn clothes, you know, it doesn't matter how intelligent she is, she's still going to be seen as lesser than, despite the fact that they already see her as lesser than because she's black.
Yeah. Her resilience in the situation is still one of the most amazing things.
Yeah, because we get the psychiatrist, Dr. Coles, played by Kevin Pollak, one of the few recognizable stars in this movie. And he even questioned, you know, like, anyone else in this situation would be showing trauma and just fall apart, but Ruby doesn't. And he, you know, connects that to the strong family bond that Ruby has with her mother, father, her siblings. That they're like her rock to keep her going.
I did like that aspect of the movie, that it wasn't just like, oh, she's an exceptional individual because, you know, whatever. It's that she had a strong community around her. She had family who believed in her. She had, you know, people in her life. You know, she had friends. We see that one friend that even though her dad doesn't want her playing with Ruby, the friend keeps being like, no, you're my friend. I'm going to come over and play at your house, even though my dad doesn't like it, you know, like, and that's kind of cute, you know?
Yeah, and it goes to the strong ties of black family and black community just sticking together because they kind of have to. Because especially going back here, you know, if they don't stick up for each other, no one will.
Yeah, I do like that it did show that not all people in the black community were for integration. I mean, even her father wasn't really on board with the idea.
Yeah, I mean, he was a soldier. He fought in the war. And he said, you know, even when he was fighting side by side with white soldiers, they still treated him like another. He was still a black soldier. He wasn't a real soldier. Even after he risked his life to save a white soldier, he was never seen as an equal among the ranks. So
yeah, they say in the movie that he got a Purple Heart in Korea, in an integrated company, you know, where whatever he served in. I don't remember if they they said the actual branch. I'm sorry, but the thing is like I said, when I said that they could have put more into this movie to make it more dramatic, I do know that Ruby's parents did separate, kind of as a result of all the stress of this. I don't know exactly what year that they did, whether it was kind of after the first year or whatever, but this whole decision to have Ruby at the center of the integration really was kind of the thing that stressed the marriage between her parents.
And especially with her dad, because he's a mechanic. We see him wearing the coveralls for the first half of the movie. So he gets fired from his job because his fellow workers don't want to work with a black man whose daughter goes to a white school. Despite, as he says, he's the best worker in that garage, never had a complaint, never had a dissatisfied customer, but he was let go because his coworkers were uncomfortable with his daughter going to a white school. As you said, some neighbors are yelling at him specifically because now there are cop cars and U.S. Marshals in their neighborhood just to protect Ruby from any attack by psycho white racists.
The government knew, and I assume they don't really specify this in the movie, but knowing how these things went at the time, I assume they were already getting threats.
Yeah.
And that as soon as it was known who the girl was and where she lived, that whole neighborhood would be in danger. So, they put up cordons and barricades, and immediately the guards started learning, who all the people were who lived in that neighborhood. And
right at the beginning, we have that one cop kind of stop her dad, saying, "Hey, we need you to give us some idea that we know that you're living here, because we want to make sure everyone here is supposed to be here."
Yeah, and at first it's really tense because, you see a bunch of white cops in a black neighborhood and that's not going to go well. But for once, it is actually like they're there to make sure nobody comes in, and because if you're not really aware of what was going on at the time, I mean, we were having children Ruby's age killed in fire bombings, and I mean, people's houses were being targeted because they were involved in the civil rights movement, and there were assassinations going on. So it was a massive concern.
Which is why we get the U.S. Marshals escorting Ruby to and from school.
Yeah. But I mean, all sorts of things happened, not only to her immediate family, but like her grandparents lived in Mississippi. I mean, she lived in Louisiana, of course, so that's where the film takes place, but her grandparents lived in Mississippi and were sharecroppers on some land, and the landlords threw them off the land because their granddaughter was involved in this.
Again, I don't know if this was actually happening or this was invented for the movie, but there is a running storyline here of Ruby Ruby drawing pictures with the psychiatrist. How she draws white people perfectly, and then when she comes to drawing black people, she draws them deformed, because this sense of white people being perfect and there's something wrong with black people that's not drilled into her head, that I guess from the fact that she's a black girl going to a white school. And one of the great, points that this movie does is Ruby's mother, very religious, pray for these people with hate in their hearts and hopefully they'll find the way. And Ruby ends up praying for the protesters that they would find, get rid of the hate in their heart. And, she kind of makes this complaint, why would, Jesus wouldn't give us anything that we couldn't handle. And her father takes that picture of Jesus and saying, this isn't really what Jesus looks like. We don't know what Jesus really looked like because no one who was alive was there. This is someone's interpretation of what Jesus looked like. And yes, the most famous picture, the painting, is of a white man. So if you show this picture of this white man to your black child, they're going to think God is white. So of course, that's already drilled into her head that white people are special and something's wrong with black people. Which I was not expecting that in this kind of movie. Especially, that being thing, that's also a bit of a controversial thing now, still in 2023. That if you even question the idea of Jesus not being a white man, it's sacrilegious or something. It's weird.
Yeah, I mean, it is a bit more, there has been a bit more pushback,
Mm.
There's a famous bit in the Boondocks, which is a genius cartoon. If you've never watched, I highly recommend it. Where Huey says that he refuses to watch Passion of the Christ because it has white Jesus. So, it's like, yeah, I mean, it is an interesting bit in there that I also kind of didn't expect to see. Like I said, this movie kind of really goes hard at certain things for a Wonderful World of Disney weird educational film. There's also that bit where, and I couldn't decide if this was like cringe or what, but the sweet white teacher that's been teaching Ruby trying to explain what slavery was to her.
Trying to explain it as I guess her way of trying to explain it to a literal 6-year-old. Again, this is a movie specifically made for young children to watch. So it's not the best explanation.
Yeah, but the thing is that I kind of wanted to be like, sweetheart, this is a 6-year-old child in the South, and I don't know exactly who wrote this movie, but even a 6-year-old a black child in the South is going to know what slavery is by the time they're 6.
Again, I think that's just for the audience at home.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, this is definitely like, this is the white teacher explaining to the white children who are going to watch this movie what slavery is.
And they really pushed
it was such a cringe little scene to me in the beginning, because I was like, there is no way this child does not know what's up. Thank you very much.
They even try to have the teacher be part of this outsider group because she's from the North and it's an all Southern school. And they try to do the whole other thing to her too. You're not one of us. You're not from here. You're from up north.
Yankee go home kind of mentality, which I'm not saying does not exist.
They try to put it on equal footing as Ruby, and that's another cringe moment there.
Yeah. And they make it seem like the teacher was brought in specifically to teach Ruby, and I'm not sure that was the case. I don't. That was another thing I could not verify.
They make the way they set it up in the movie is that none of the teachers want to teach her. In fact, there are quite a number of teachers that are just as angry that she's there as the parents outside are.
Yeah, and they even say that teachers resigned rather than teach in an integrated school, which I'm sure probably did happen.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that that's, inaccurate, but I don't know if that particular teacher was specifically brought in. All that I know was that she was called by the superintendent of schools and said that he wanted to offer her a teaching position, and she asked them if it was going to be an integrated or a segregated school, and he said, would it make any difference to you either way? And she was like, no. And she took the job in the school, and and then everything I've read just says she was the only teacher willing to teach Ruby. So I don't know if they were just calling teachers that they thought would be willing to teach in integrated schools because they lost teachers who wouldn't. And they knew, because it says in the movie, and that it is accurate, that her background was teaching on military bases, and that she had taught children of all different kinds of backgrounds. So I assume that means that the schools on the military bases had been integrated, because if the companies were integrated, then their children were probably learning together.
And probably the military not wanting to hire separate teachers for black and white children.
So it probably meant that they had heard there was somebody with teaching credentials living in New Orleans who had taught on an integrated military base, and went, oh, well, if we send her to a school we're planning on integrating, she probably won't immediately resign. But I don't know that for sure, because I haven't been able to find more deeply on her story than that. But that's probably my guess. And the story, the movie doesn't really go far enough into her background. Beyond that, she's just, the well-meaning liberal in the sense that she's not as hateful toward black people as the Southerners are, that we see. That's the thing, is that we only really see two white families, white, people that were kind of instrumental to Ruby's story in this movie.
Yeah, we have Miss Henry, the teacher, Dr. Coles, the psychiatrist, and to a lesser extent, Dr. Coles' wife, who learns how to cook black food.
Yeah, and I don't know much about Mrs. Cole, to be honest.
She doesn't really do much. Again, her whole thing
I mean, I just don't know much about the real woman. The movie makes her seem like a very wonderful person.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, no offense to the real woman.
There's not a lot of information about her online.
Yeah. I mean, as of this recording, Mrs. Henry, the teacher, and Dr. Coles, the psychiatrist, are both still with us. As being integral to, getting Ruby integrated and stuff, they really only show the head of the NAACP in the area, who chooses Ruby, Dr. Broyard, who I don't know much about, honestly. Then they show Mrs. Henry, her teacher, and Dr. Coles, the psychiatrist. And I don't know what Dr. Broyard's background was, but as for the two white people in the story that are spotlighted, both of them are well-meaning Yankees who have ended up in the South because of the military, it seems.
Yeah, they even say that Dr. Cole served in the military. He's wearing a military uniform when we first see him.
Yeah, and then Mrs. Henry, her husband served in the military, and she taught on military bases. So it does seem like that's being a bit interesting because they cut out basically all of the other support, both from the Black community and from the white community. And Ruby herself has said that, yes, while there was pushback, mainly from the white community, but also a little bit from the Black community, and we see the pushback in the movie, we don't actually see the support from really either community in the movie.
Yeah, again, it's part of that dramatization and made to probably give a little bit more adversity to Ruby in the film for a narrative sense, and also to simplify the movie, because this really is I would dare say, oversimplification of the situation.
Yeah.
But it worked again, this is made for a children's audience. This was the movie of the week shown during the Family Hour Disney, movie.
Yeah. And I don't want to knock this movie, because I actually think it's a pretty decent movie for what it's trying to do.
For a 90s TV movie of the week.
Yeah, I mean, for the limitations it had in the financing and, all that kind of production end. However, the thing I liked most about it was that it showed that Ruby did have a support network behind her, and that it wasn't just like, watch what one girl did alone.
Yeah, they do their best to spotlight, to not make Ruby a Mary Sue. Yes, she's intelligent. Yes, she's clever, but she didn't do it alone. She had the support system. She had members of the NAACP. She had her family. She had her teacher. She had the psychiatrist. And yes, other members that are not shown in this movie at all. So it's just the sense of community, which helps her, which is great. But I wish excuse me. You're right. I wish they had showed that more. But I guess that doesn't work in a narrative sense. Again, whenever you watch a biopic, no matter what biopic you're watching of who it is, they always alter events for a narrative sense. And I think that's what they did here.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like there are things that I think would work dramatically very well. Eventually, there were supportive members of the community that began to walk behind the cars taking Ruby to school as an escort to counter the protesters waiting for her at the school. That's a great dramatic moment.
If this movie had a bigger budget and could hire more extras, they probably could have done that.
Yeah, I mean, they hired a lot of extras to be the angry people outside.
And not that money. I mean, they
Yeah.
do some very clever camera tricks to make the crowd look bigger than what it is.
Oh yeah, they only had like 20 or 30 extras, and
I don't even think
they
that.
filmed it. They filmed it to look like
in one shot it looks like there was probably a dozen people there.
Yeah, but they did use a lot of clever camera tricks to make it look larger, because the crowds were rather significant.
Yeah.
I mean, this was New Orleans. So, I mean, there were not an insignificant number of people that showed up. The sad thing is that, like you said, I mean, it is easy for us who were not alive then to think of, like, this is ancient history, But it's like, our parents were alive then.
Yeah.
In
some cases, either parents or grandparents, depending on where you grew up, were likely the people protesting against their schools being integrated.
Yeah,
ironically, those are the same people trying to make sure this stuff isn't being taught, because they don't want that to be known.
It's so interesting, because you kind of think that you're, like, oh, well, even though we are, that was in the past, and even though some of those people are living, of course, they've learned and grown and everything. But I'll tell you, the first time that I went to an event and was met with people kind of protesting in the way that you see in these images, or as portrayed in this movie, which really did, I will give them credit, whatever they told the extras in their portrayal really matches the photographs and footage from the time. Just the absolute vile hatred and anger on the faces of these people that are captured in those images for posterity. To be standing peacefully in a place and to have people shout just the vilest death threats in your face.
And we're seeing that now, still. As I've said, we're doing this during Pride Month. So there are still Pride events, and there's video of it now of people just protesting Pride events, saying the same vile, disgusting, dare I say, evil things. Just the target is different now. It's no longer targeted at just Black people. It's targeted to the LGBTQ plus community.
Yeah.
So it's.
I mean, the first time I had it happen to me, the first people that yelled at me in my face were older, and I thought, like, okay, well, these people are older, maybe they just never learned, So as they're coming by and they're screaming things at you and stuff, and you can just kind of say to yourself, like, all right, I feel sorry for you. You never learned. And then as things go on and more people show up, and then the thing that hit me about the first time it happened and the group that was there is that suddenly there was a family there. Like, it was very obviously like a husband and wife and like 3 kids from between, like, 6 and 11 maybe. And the parents were probably mid 30s to early 40s, I'd guess. and they start screaming stuff. And then they grabbed their children and they started teaching them right in front of me how to scream slurs and death threats at people. And I stood there and watched as parents taught their children to scream slurs and death threats at strangers.
Teaching their children to hate, which is mentioned in this movie.
When moments before the children had no idea why their parents were screaming or mad. They were just standing there looking confused between their parents and the group of us across the street, you know? And then suddenly their parents just lean down and they start saying, like, scream this, scream that. And of course, they're little kids. They're gonna do what their parents say. Ruby says in the movie, well, if my mommy told me not to play with another kid, I wouldn't play with another kid because that's what my mommy told me to do.
Yeah. And even
because the little boy says, my mommy told me not to play with you because you're an N-word. And she goes like, well, I felt bad for him, but I understood because if my mommy told me not to play with a little kid, I wouldn't play with that little kid for whatever reason, you know?
And that is
mommy said so.
And that is something the teacher straight up says. You know, those kids, you know, you say the kids don't want to play with Ruby, but they only say that because they were taught to hate by their parents. Those kids didn't know what hate was until they were told it. And even from a historical perspective, there are pictures of this era of people bringing their children to lynchings and mobbings and telling their kids to cheer on the death and destruction that's going on. Because, yes, this is what you're supposed to do to whatever. Excuse me. This is what you're, you know, like, it's...
this is what you're supposed to do to those kind of people. Yeah. And it's one thing to look back at it in a historical photograph and say like, oh, that's, you know, but the first time I ever watched it happen in front of my eyes was like, I went home and was physically ill for days. It's just to stand there and watch a parent teach children. And I thought, you know, it was in the town I lived in. Like, and I was like, I'm going to go to the grocery store tomorrow and probably run into those people. You know, I do not live in a large town. I feel bad because I wonder, like, the thing we never hear about is Ruby integrated. And the very next year, you know, we hear everything about that first year, but what was that second year like?
Yeah,
did any of those kids ever apologize? Did any of those kids ever go like, wow, my parents were real idiots? Did any of the parents ever apologize?
Probably not.
I'm gonna poison you woman ever send a I'm sorry letter? Like, you know, I always wonder about things like that.
I don't know. Probably not. I'm good. I mean,
probably not, knowing people. But I just always wonder, like, did at any point, this is her in first grade. I mean, yeah, even in a big town like New Orleans, some of those kids had to have been with her until, like, grade 12, you know? Like, so I just wonder about that. Like, they do show one of the teachers towards the end of the story kind of changing her mind a little bit. Like, she's very much against, she's the other first grade teacher. She's teaching all the white kids in first grade next door to where Mrs. Henry is teaching Ruby. And at the end of the year, when Ruby makes the highest grades, this was the other thing I couldn't verify, was at the end of the year, Ruby makes the highest grades on the standardized test or whatever at the end of the year.
Mm-hmm.
And the principal lady or whatever who's been the villain says, well, I'm going to adjust her test scores because she's had private tutoring all year. And of course, Mrs. Henry says, well, the only reason it was private tutoring was because, you wouldn't let her be taught in a normal class setting.
And then she tries to say, well, we need to adjust her grades to more adequately represent her situation. Basically, she's black. We can't have her have the highest test scores in the school. We're gonna change that.
It'll make the white children look bad. Yeah.
And Mrs. Henry calls her out on it.
Yeah, Mrs. Henry calls her out on it, but then so does the other first grade teacher. And she's like, I know that Ruby did that work. She's like, because she's witnessed it. She's witnessed that Ruby can, read really well and, all that kind of stuff. Because she's seen her in those moments when her class goes over for, joint playtime or whatever.
Mm-hmm. There's a very obvious dub in her speech because she says she busts her hiney, but she's clearly mouthing the word ass.
Yeah. It's the one thing. I wonder if that's the one thing they gave up so that they could keep some of those other racial slurs in there.
Yeah.
I gotta tell you, if your child has been raised right and doesn't know some of the other racial slurs, they will learn a lot of racial slurs if you show them this movie, because they use all of the other ones too. Not all of them, of course. There are so many. Why do humans do that? But yeah, people suck. But they use quite a few slurs that they can get away with saying on TV. For black people in this movie, both on protest signs and for thing. I gotta tell you, that song they sing about segregation, that was a real song that protesters really sang. You can hear it for a few seconds in the movie. The Glory, Glory, Hallelujah song.
Mm.
They rewrote it at the time to be about segregation, and that was a real song that really got sung at the time. I was like, when I heard it in the movie, I was like, oh, okay, that's what we're doing. All right. So, I mean, a lot of the chants and stuff were authentic to the time because you can hear them in old news footage and stuff looking back. The thing is that the only thing you can really ding this movie on is that it was a TV movie of the week.
Like, if this was from a major studio, I mean, granted, if Disney had put the budget into this and not just made it a TV movie of the week, but a full, properly budgeted theatrical film, you would get, the better film quality, the better acting, better actors, higher quality, higher rank, trying to find the right word, bigger name actors,
Yeah, which is not to discount any of these actors. All of these actors were really good. Even the kids.
Mm-hmm.
The little girl who played Ruby was really good, and she's apparently one of those child actors that did acting as a kid and then aged out and went, I don't think I want to be an actor.
It happens.
Which is fine, but she's great in this. She's, like, adorable. You like her. You don't feel like she's stilted when delivering lines.
Yeah, it comes off very natural. It's just the script is clearly aimed at a younger audience. That's my only, if I had to put a complaint, again, it's the 90s TV quality. It's the script is not, it's clearly aimed towards a lot younger than you would think for this. Clearly tourniquet because this is supposed to fit a 2-hour television time slot. but
with commercials.
Yeah.
And there are some very odd breaks in there to allow for commercials, you know.
Yeah.
But the thing is that I think if you did this in a very similar way, but theatrically, and for a slightly older audience, there's a few things I would change. I would want to show the more of what was going on in the community, both the Black community and the white community, to show the support for her, especially in the Black community, because the way that they made this, it seemed like the entirety of the Black community was just against integration. And while I know that there was pushback in the Black community, and I don't want to discount that historically, because it is an important part to remember as well, there were people in both communities who were against integration. There were also people in both communities who were for integration. You know, it was a very complicated national issue for both the Black community and the white community, and I kind of wish the movie would have gotten a little more into that interplay in the community.
I wish they had, I mean, granted, it just covers the first year, but I would like to have gone a little bit more into the rest of her life. We see the final day of school, and then a narrator saying that in the 90s, she found the Ruby Bridges Foundation to teach cultural diversity in schools, which, fine, great. I wish we could have gotten, a little bit more of that.
Yeah, I mean, she eventually went on to get married and have children, and she worked as a travel agent for a while in her adult life. Then she has become the chair of the Ruby Bridges Foundation and spends most of her time now as a public speaker and a advocate for various social causes and, general equality and diversity and educational opportunity for various groups. That has kind of been, from what I can tell, a lot of her life as an adult. But I would kind of like to know a little bit more about the years of the actual, first couple of years of the real integration.
Yeah.
When she wasn't just alone in the classroom. But I know that there was only so much they could show in the 90 minutes for this movie, and that they really just wanted to show, like I said, this movie is very obviously aimed at early, elementary school to middle school in the way it's set up. And for that, I think it does a marvelous job.
Yeah.
I do not want to discount it at all. But I wish there were a more geared for an older audience, something that you could show like high schoolers and adults of this story that kind of goes in a little more depth.
This film feels like it's only scratching the surface. But yeah, what can you do? again, for a 90-minute television movie made in the 90s, it actually is pretty good. It tells its message well and tells a great story, and it's, it is a movie that should be shown to children in schools. It's taught as part of American history curriculum, because this is American history, the desegregation of schools and the pushback it got.
Yeah.
So, Kiki, does Ruby Bridges have the magic?
Yeah, I think it does, as long as you remember kind of what it was and how it was made,
I agree. I think this is a very good, like I said, this, for what it is, for a 90s TV movie, it's not, I've seen worse, especially 90s TV biopics.
Yeah, I was actually very surprised. I expected it to be a lot less truthful than it was, because a lot of biopics do take liberties.
When you're watching a biopic in general, you're going to get some fabrication of events, and they don't do a lot here, at least ones that are not obvious.
Yeah, I couldn't really find anything that I could say like, that didn't happen, so
yeah, I would definitely recommend it. It could have been better, but I've seen a lot worse, especially this era of television movies, especially television biopic movies.
Yeah, and definitely I think if you have children that are asking about the time, that want to know what it was like, this is very appropriate for elementary to middle school children. Although I would watch it with them, because I think they might have some questions about certain language used.
Mm-hmm.
So, this is not one to like put on in the background and then leave your kid, to watch by themselves. But if you have children in that age and you want to educate them about that particular time period in American history, this is actually a really good one. I don't really have any major qualms with it. So.
Mm-hmm. So let's move on to next week. Kiki, it's time to get back into the TARDIS as we are continuing our 60th anniversary retrospective on Doctor Who with the 7th Doctor, Sylvester McCoy. We are going to be wrapping up the classic series, and we're going to see how Doc number 7 turns out. Come back next week for the 7th Doctor, Sylvester McCoy, and we will talk to you all next time. Bye.
Bye. Don't let the magic stop here.
Join our conversation online on Facebook at Rewatching the Magic,
Twitter at Rewatch the Magic,
and of course, new episodes every week at rewatchingthemagic.podbean.com.
Remember, the magic is for everyone.
It only stops if you let it. Podcasts are fun,
but there's work to be done.
We encourage you to get involved. Here are some organizations we support.
The American Civil Liberties Union fights for the constitutional rights of all Americans. Find them at aclu.org.
The National Network of Abortion Funds helps people find access to safe abortion services. Their site is abortionfunds.org.
The Trevor Project provides a 24/7 crisis helpline for LGBTQ youth and education services for schools on LGBTQ issues. They can be found at thetrevorproject.org.
Or find a way to help in your area. Is that good, or do you want to do a third round?
I think we can do that, and you can piece it together from the two.
All right, that sounds good. Let's stop the recording.